All right, so we're on to chapter 2 of Real Estate Investing 101. So just to sort of level set in case you just came to this version before watching it, we started with sort of a primer, sort of breaking down what we're going to go through together, kind of there's a video called Start Here. Talks about how we're going to break this down together, how we're going to walk through 6 different chapters, of which this is number 2. And then we went into goal setting. What I hope you took away from goal setting is I attack it a little differently than most. I sort of ask you to sort of internalize where you're at, where you want to go, what are your strengths and weaknesses. And then what you'll do is you'll break down and have really 2 different goals. One is sort of the North Star, what's the end point, and then what are some things you could do to work on your weaknesses. So that brings us to chapter 2. I call this one Getting Your Money Right. And as always, do me a favor if you happen to like this. Do me a favor and subscribe. It's the only way I sort of can find out the value if I'm producing anything of value, is to see that subscriber number tick up. Another nice thing to do is hit the like, little thumbs up. And as always, if you leave a comment, question, tell me what I missed. A lot of experienced investors out there maybe taking a look at this. And if you think I missed something in a certain topic, share it. I'll give you credit. This is all done with by giving and the like. So in the end, getting your money right. What does that mean in chapter 2? So we're going to sort of just ask some basic questions. Again, this is a 101 session. So you're going to take kind of understand where you are where you are at from a cash down payment perspective, right? If you were going to put 20% down, what do you have available, right? And again, if you go back to the setup of these videos, I'm assuming a lot of the people watching this are full-time employees. They may be suffering from what I call CRAP, cash rich, asset poor, and they're looking to diversify. So, let's figure out what you have to put down. The other thing I'm going to ask you to do is have a reserve account. As I've shared in many stories, real estate will test you. Things will break. People will do bad things. You as a landlord will ultimately be responsible for lots of things that you feel you shouldn't be responsible for, but you are. So have a reserve account. Something I do recommend is having an account, a separate account somewhere else that you only use for emergencies, and it's more specifically for repair emergencies. Excuse me. So something I highly recommend. And then have you gotten pre-approved or pre-qualified? This makes a difference, especially in a market that rolls over. Pre-qualification basically means you walked by a banker and said, hey, I want to buy something, and they looked at you and said, are you employed? Do you have an income? And they gave you a little letter. It's probably a little more complicated than that, but that's about what it's worth. Pre-approval means you've gone through and built a financial statement. You've talked about your income, your expenses. They've ran your credit. Right? They do this deep review of you, and then they look at your cash reserves and they make sure that you're an adequate risk. So pre-approval is far more approved, and as we're starting number 2 and getting you ready to buy your first investment, make sure you're pre-approved. Pre-qual is annoying when you're a seller, so make sure you do the work and make sure you're pre-approved, because the last thing you want to do is find out that you're not. And then have you been able to calculate, even using online calculators, estimated mortgage payments for different options? Because you're about to be hit with lots of different payment options. Right, there's the standard 30-year term, which we probably all know, 30-year fixed. Many of us probably also know there's 15-year fixed, and then they're going to hit you with 7-2 amortization or 7-2 ARMs, and all these other things are going to throw at you. So you just got to get comfortable, realizing that we're in this for the long term. I generally recommend, even in this raising right environment, getting long-term fixed rate debt. For most of you, that means 30-year. For a couple of you that have shorter time horizons and are willing to put more down, that means 15-year. But realize that you need to be able to figure out what that mortgage payment is, and that's important, because when you're looking at buying something, I would just tell you to not overcomplicate it. Right? Assume your expenses are 50% of rent, and then assume the mortgage payment's 50% or less. Right? If again, easy math, right? If it's renting for $1,000 and you can assume the expenses are $500, as long as your mortgage payment's below $500, you're good. Excuse me. So again, just to be able to calculate a simple mortgage payment using any of the online mortgage calculators is fine. Even doing an interest-only calculation in Excel is fine, right? Take the principal or take the loan amount times, I don't know, 6%, divide by 12, and that gives you a 6% interest only. So lots of ways just to figure out a raw number. So loan options, you got to figure out what your goals were for part one, right? Remember, chapter one of this was goal setting. What are your goals, right? Do you need a 30-year loan for easier cash flow, right? Your payments will be about 20 or 25% lower, so easier to cash flow. But maybe because of your situation or because you have goals of giving your children something, maybe you want a 15-year loan for some reason. Again, I'm not judging or anything of that matter, just stating that if you do a 15-year loan, you have to put more down because it's harder to cash flow because you're basically taking out 180 months of payments that have to be absorbed in 180 versus 360 months. So payments will obviously be higher. The other thing is, and this was a mistake of mine in the beginning, a lot of the people I talk to will be approved for just their standard 80% mortgage. What I mean by that is, again, let's do easy math. Let's say you're going to buy something for 200 grand. The bank's going to be able to loan you $160,000, which means you have to put down 20% of 200 or $40,000. The bank's going to be looking at you, the borrower, and not the property. And what I mean by that is they're not going to care if they're creating an alligator for you because they know how much income you have and they know that you can suffer a little $200 income drop and all of that because you have a good job, or your wife and you have a good job, or you have a lot of savings, or whatever. Never, ever, ever create an alligator, either when purchasing or refinancing. I did that once. I discussed in the book. It's not fun. If again, let's just say you were doing a $200,000 purchase, and for whatever reason you had to put 30% down or 60 grand to make it cash flow, and the bank says, no, you don't have to do that. Save 20 grand. No, you put 60K down. Just because the bank approves you doesn't mean you have to take them for their full amount. And I don't care about maximum leverage and all these other things that people spout about that try to make you get confused. Your goal is not maximum leverage. Your goal is cash flow, low risk, good return on time. You're not worried about maximum leverage. And then when in doubt, if you're not sure, when in doubt, just always do a longer term. There's nothing that says you can't do a 30-year loan and pay it off in 15, double the payments. That'll pay it off fast, right? So if you just want to pay it off faster or pay it off in chunks, get a 30-year loan and then every year you get a yearly bonus and whack it, go for it. But when in doubt, you just don't know what's going to happen in the future. So get a longer term when in doubt, okay? So interest rates and lenders. So right now this one is, it's going on. Interest rates are rising. Everybody's panicking. They're over 5%. Oh my gosh. Well, a couple of things. I've been buying properties for almost 16 years now. I've had mortgage rates as high as 9%. I did some loans at 9%, some at 8, some at 7, some at 6, and obviously lower. Interest rate's just a number that you use to calculate cash flow. And if their interest rates are rising and they go up too much, then properties will come down. All right, they just won't be as affordable, or they'll stop appreciating, or whatever. Or there'll be rental properties and rents will go up, and it doesn't matter, right? The other thing that you will see is interest rates won't rise forever, right? Sure, maybe they'll rise for the next 3 years. Maybe they'll rise for the next 7 years. They'll eventually turn around. And at some point, you'll be able to refinance, get a lower rate, probably pull some money out. So I wouldn't get too fixated on the rate. I only know of a couple of people that have carried a 30-year fixed rate mortgage to the completion, right? Most people, myself included, I've done some refinances. I've done some 1031 exchanges. I'm trying to think. So all the properties I bought during those first 6 years, all were 1031 exchanged. I do still own a couple of the apartment buildings. I think I've owned them for 10 or 12 years. Right? So they're I don't know, roughly halfway through because I do all 30-year stuff. So again, it doesn't matter. I could have refied them and all of those things. So again, just realize interest rates go up, interest rates come down. You shouldn't let interest rates rising stop you. That's what's happening now. And that's just a shame. Just because interest rates went up an eighth, people are saying no to investment properties. That's silly. In the scheme of 30 years, an eighth, and especially when you're going to refinance it in 6 years or 10 years or whatever, it's just silly. There's also a fixed and variable. Most of the people I'm talking to have a plan for their property, so it's either a 15 or 30-year plan, so get a fixed. If, however, you are envisioning a 5-year run and you want to buy for 5 years and then cash out, maybe a variable makes sense. I think anything less than a 5-year fixed is gambling, because I think the market can go crazy longer than we can remain liquid. So I don't recommend anything shorter than 5 years, because I think they even have 3-year arms. I think there's 3, 5s, and 7s. There might even be a 1, although that probably is only on owner occupants. I don't know that that's on investment. But in the end, I recommend for most of you fixed rate mortgages, either a 15 or a 30. But there are times where a variable makes sense. And then what I wanted to talk about is just the different people that can loan money. And I'll actually close with some examples. So there's banks, credit unions, your mortgage brokers, all those folks. They're basically the ones that are in most cases selling off their loans to and insured by FHA, selling them off to Wall Street, whatever that is. And today, most of you should be worried about or have a goal of getting to 4 rental properties, because getting to 4 investment loans today is very easy, or at least easy, if not very easy. Going from 4 to 10 is slightly more difficult. So most of you just starting out shouldn't think past 4, right? How can I get to 4? That should be your goal. And you're going to likely be going through a bank. However, just so you know, there are other ways that you can get lending done. There's this thing called hard money. Hard money typically means a lot more expensive, both in interest rate and fees, but a lot less restrictive, right? It's not going through FHA. It's not backed by the government. It's basically a company or a wealthy individual who has decided to loan out money, their own money or a pool of money, for, again, some significant interest rates, typically loan to values of 50 or 60%, where a bank loan, as I talked about earlier, could easily be 80, in some cases 90, and even 97%, right? There are 3% down today. That's a bank loan. No hard money that I know of is going to do a 3% down hard money loan. It's just silly. So again, hard money is out there. We have used hard money. I'll talk about it at the end. I'll just save it for there, but we have used hard money over our career. And then there's private money. Private money is just what you might think it is. It's basically relationship based. Typically, private money is done between friends and family. You are working out a relationship, and we've done a couple of different private money programs. We'll talk about it at the end, because again, it's just what's been done. But depending on the environment, right? There was a time where we gave out double-digit interest rates. Environments changed, and people wanted to be investment partners, so they wanted some of the equity. Right, so private money is interesting because you can get creative, and you can listen to your friends and family and figure out what works for both of you. So again, lots of ways to get loans in real estate and get creative. And it really just means talking to people and really understand what's going on. So lots of different things to think about when you're talking about lending, because again, lending is something you're going to have throughout your career of real estate investing. One of the questions I get a lot is, do you pay off your debts, or do you believe in carrying lots of debt? It seems that the environment is, hey, do I want maximum leverage? And I want as much mortgages on my debt, so if I lose them, F the bank. And that's one side. And the other one is, I hate debt and I want to pay it off as fast as possible. That seems to be the extremes that I hear about all the time. And, it's something you're going to have to figure out for yourself. I can tell you, while we were growing our portfolio, we were always about the next acquisition, and we would have seen taking cash to pay off our mortgage as a mistake. That's just us. I'm not saying it was right or wrong. It's just what we did. And, but now that we're done and we're out, we have paid off several properties and have plans to pay off more, just because we want to have a set that's paid off and a set that's highly leveraged. Just to give us flexibility, should something happen, we can go raise a lot more capital if we needed to. So again, lots of things to think about. Something again to think about is as time goes by, as rates change, maybe go lower, as appreciation picks up and what you bought for 150 is now worth 200, do you refinance? I can tell you something we did a whole bunch those first 5 years is refi our properties. Those first 4 properties or 5 properties we bought, we refinanced all of them, and we bought more property, right? We pulled out our down payment for that property and more and bought another property. So refinancing and taking what's called a cash out refi was very beneficial. You do have to be careful. As I mentioned earlier or on other shows, my first refinance cash out, I took out too much and I created an alligator that consumed cash every month, and that was a mistake. A mistake I still talk about. So you can clearly see I see that as a mistake. So again, but realize a refinance, and that's why I don't worry about interest rates. Yes, interest rates are going up, great. Well, what happens when we have the next recession and Fed slashes rates, and it's going to happen, people. So don't sweat. So again, when you refi, do you just refi the interest rate and then keep the term, right? Let's say it's 7 years from now. So you have 23 years left. Do you refi the balance, let's say it's 110, and just do a re-amortization so your mortgage payment goes down in that case? Or do you take some cash out so you can buy something else? So just realize that lending on an investment property is something you get to reconsider every 5 to 7 years in my experience as appreciation and interest rates changes. Again, I don't expect most of you to buy a property, put in a 30-year loan, and never refi. I mean, it certainly could happen. I would just tell you at least to think about it every 5 years and say, does it make sense? What are rates today? What's the value? What else could I do with that money? So again, just things to think about. And the reason I want to talk about that is, when I take out refi dollars, did you know that that's not taxable? Think about that. You buy a house for $100,000. 10 years from now, it's worth $200,000. You refi it and you take out $50,000 and basically profit, right? Because you bought it for 100, it's worth 200, and now you've got a loan for 150. That $50,000 is a loan. It is not taxable. You pay it back with interest rate and it's secured against the property, but that 50 grand is not taxable. So again, that's pretty interesting stuff. And again, talk to your accountant and the like to make sure your situation is not unique. But that has been my experience. So quick knowledge check. Do you know the difference between pre-qualified and pre-approval? Think about that. Do you know what the difference is? What kind of properties do you think banks lend on? That's knowledge check number 2. Think about that. So the first one, pre-qual is I just call it basically worthless. I wish they would frankly stop doing them. It's basically, what's your name? Do you have a job? Here's a piece of paper, right? It's not worth a lot. Take the time and get pre-approved. Fill out a form, a financial statement. Where you have your checking, savings, Schwab accounts, or trading accounts, how much real estate, how much credit card debt, how many car loans, all that stuff. Fill it out. Fill out a financial statement, right? Get pre-approved. Know exactly what you can afford. And then as far as what do banks lend on, they only lend on clean properties. This is important for a couple of things. A lot of the properties that are in the MLS that look run down and are cheap, banks will not lend on. Again, banks won't lend on properties that need work, that needs repairs. They don't do it. That's not what they do, right? They're taking a very highly leveraged, right? 80, 90, 97% of the loan. They don't want to take risk on a property that has repair issues that you could walk away from. Right? That's not what they do. So that's why there's guys like me who pay cash for distressed assets, who spend the time repairing and investing all that money and taking the risk and creating a pride of ownership. That's why we do what we do. We get a small profit from doing that, and it allows banks to continue lending. So some financing stories. Excuse me, sorry, I actually think I have a cold, so I apologize for coughing. Using banks. Couple stories about using banks. So when we first started, the first 5 years, banks were really easy. Frankly, we got a lot of loans through a company called Countrywide. They were doing these 80-10-10 loans, which stood for an 80% first, a 10% second, and then we brought in 10%. So the owner only brought in 10% of the purchase price. And it was like an assembly line. It was like, here, sign your name 30 times, initial here, and you were done. It was so easy. Then there was a time in like 2010, 11, 12 where banks wouldn't talk to us. Then there was a time where banks only talked to us for commercial properties, right? So again, using banks is the easiest. You get the best rates. So if you're starting out, use a bank. Go to the bank that has your checking account. Don't overcomplicate it. They're all basically the same because they all sell to FHA, right? They'll all be certainly within a quarter, and I'd be shocked if they're not within an eighth. So use a bank for your first four. Hard money. Hard money was something that saved us. When the market rolled over and properties started being sold for land value, we could have bought a few properties, but we would not have been able to buy as many as we wanted because we found a hard money lender who charged us 9% interest. 2 points, appraisal fee, all these other things, but 9% interest, right? I don't care if it's 5% today, right? Or 5.5%. I paid 9% interest. And I still have them today. I didn't have any bother to refi them. It's not worth it. They're too small. But the hard money is interesting because he just cared about the purchase price. He wanted, I believe, 50 or 60%, and we came in with the other half. Let's do 50%. So we bought something for $100,000. He would lend 50, and we'd have to come in for the other 50. That saved us. That allowed us to buy twice as much stuff. And again, all this stuff was rough, right? We weren't doing anything that would bank qualify. All of these were vacant. All of them were, people were angry. People were doing mean things, breaking windows, graffiti, all kinds of stuff. So they were a mess. And then there's private money. There are times where you have friends and family that don't have the time to invest. I'll just, again, use our situations. Back when the market crashed and people were saving money left and right and interest was under 1%, we found some people that wanted to give us money. So we actually set up a private lending where we would buy a property, again, let's say for $100,000, fix it up. Then we would go get a private lender, right? A friend that would loan us $100,000. They'd get a first trust deed and a note, and we would pay him 10% interest, right? The hard money guy charged us 9%, but again, he had lots of fees. So we paid our friends and family 10%, and we were happy to do it. We got all our money back in that case, and we just kept buying and buying, and we kept recycling capital. Markets obviously changed just in the last year or so. So we did a different private money today. So interest rates are much lower than they were back then. And people were getting interested in flipping, but again, they don't have any time. So we have a private money program now for a few friends and family called the 6 and 20, right? We pay them basically 6% interest only, and then they get 20% of the upside. So again, private money, you can get really creative. Figure out what people want, and there's lots of rules. You can't advertise and do all these other things. But again, talk to your friends and family, see what they got, see if anybody's interested, go to clubs, all these other things. It's amazing what you can do when you start networking in this business. And then the other thing is residential versus commercial. And I'm going to just talk about apartment units and residential units. So residential financing is a house, a duplex, a triplex, or a quad, which is 4 units. When you get to that 5th unit, it is now commercial financing. 5, 6, 10, 20, 100. I can only speak up to 18. We've only done apartment deals as big as 18 units. So if you want to talk to above 20, I'm not your guy. But again, commercial financing versus residential. Again, residential is mainly about you, the borrower, your job, your income, your credit, where commercial is mainly about the building, right? And that's why you'll see commercial financing typically is at least 60% or 70%, right? The most I've ever seen is 70%, which means you, the buyer, needs to come in for 30 or 40%. Where residential, again, very common to do 80-20, where the bank lends 80 and you bring in 20. Commercial, again, is 70-30 or 60-40. I even saw some back in the day at 50-50. Rates are pretty similar. However, I have never seen a 30-year fixed commercial loan. The longest fixed I've seen is 10 years. I'm sure there are others, and I'm sure somebody will tell me about it. But again, the longest I've seen is 10, and it's very common to see 5 or 7. There's still 30-year amortization. They typically go variable after that term. Some force you to reapply and get a reappraisal. We've done that a couple times. So again, the other thing is, residential lending is probably, half an inch thick of paperwork. Commercial is 2 inches of paperwork, so a lot more paperwork. And again, the fees are a little bit higher and things of that nature. So again, do me a favor. That's chapter 2. Do me a favor if you like this, please subscribe. It really lets me know what I'm doing makes sense. Hit the like button. And if you think I missed something, I went too fast, you're annoyed by my coughing because I think I'm sick, leave a comment. That would be great. Next topic we're going to talk about in chapter 3 is understanding the quality difference, which should be an exciting topic. Have a great day.